Motor Mind. Hey folks, Motor Mind here. Just doing another Scotty Kilmer video. I haven't done a video for a while. Been really busy. Life's just kind of gotten a bit hectic. But I thought I'd do another one. Just happened to pop up on my suggested videos. I thought, oh, I'll have a look and see. And this one here is just, there's just so many things wrong, so many things misdiagnosed. I thought I just needed to inform you folks out there just where he's gone wrong. I don't have anything personally against Scotty Kilmer. I just have something against the fact of how he misrepresents himself, misrepresents the automotive community, saying he tends to bash a lot of technicians at different dealerships and other things, and I just don't. I'm not putting it up. I've worked at many dealerships. I've worked at also indie shops, and also now I run my own business, and it's just something that I think I've taken that I want to just get it out there and make sure people know that a lot of the information he's given is very incorrect and sometimes even borderline dangerous. So hopefully you enjoy. I've also noticed that if you look at some of these videos, Scotty's using old content and he's putting it out again, which is fine with me. I think it's best the less vehicles he works on, the better. So hopefully you enjoy. All right, let's get started.
Now, as you can see, this is a very noisy Volkswagen GTI. We'll start it up. You can easily hear the noise it's making. The GDI engines have a tendency of carboning up, and you get a lot of engine noise as the carbon builds up. Things aren't lubricated right. You hear rattling. A lot of times they start burning oil.
Alright, so in this first video here, this is a video where Scotty did 3 different ones, but the last one he did is just, he's talking about oil, and he rambles on for a good, about 10 minutes about oil. So this first one here, he's talking about GDI engines. So in GDI, when they say the carbon up, what that is it's the intake valves tend to carbon up. And the carbon up because it's direct injection going into the cylinder instead of like older vehicles injected, where more went into before the intake valves. And it usually be like into the intake itself, or maybe just up in the head a bit. And so you'd have the air fuel mixture to actually hit the valves, and any carbon that come off from the PCV system, from the oil vapor, would just be flushed off and cleaned off, because gasoline is actually a fairly decent cleaner and will dissolve, and so that's why you didn't have the problem with the old fuel injection. With the direct injection, it's only having just air going past there, and you had the PCV system, which actually introduces the crankcase gases are reintroduced into the intake, and that's for emissions, and sometimes you have oil vapor, and the oil vapor gets onto the intake valves, and then the carbon's up. I've dealt with these loads of times, and you know, to the point where I actually had to strip the intake off, and you had to go in there and clean off the carbon with it's like a really fine walnut shell, or there's other cleaners you can try. There's several different methods, depends on how intense you want to go. So that's what he's talking about. So when he says it has to do with oil isn't supposed to be where it's getting carboned up. It does, and there's just ways around that. Some people get like an oil catch can, which will you can see between the PCV, and it'll run through catch can, and so that'll kind of trap the oil vapor in there because it cools it down. Oil goes from a gas more into a solid, into a liquid, and then the gases are passed on. And some of the modern vehicles kind of have something like that, but if it starts to get too full or fails, then that's you get oil vapor gets into your intake again. So when he's talking about that, it's not so much the fact of the oil and what he's saying. I mean, obviously if the oil is old, or if it's been if you get something called oil dilution, because you have such high pressure in these GDI engines coming from the injectors, that sometimes it gets past the rings a little bit and it gets to the oil. Manufacturers and engineers have already accounted for that, which is why you have the certain service intervals. You have different vehicles that will have sensors that when it senses a certain amount of dilution in the oil, it'll trigger your service engine now, like oil change. Like no, I'm not talking service engine as in like your engine light, like EML. I'm talking about like it'll say go get a service, oil change due. That's sometimes a lot of vehicles now more, get more and more common where it's it's got a sensor. So sometimes it'll happen sooner. You go, well, my oil change isn't due yet. Well, no, it is due because you've maybe done a lot of short journeys, and it's just caused oil dilution to be past what is necessary for the engine. So that's what he's talking. But when you're saying GDI getting coked up or getting carboned up, that is more to do with oil vapor going into the intake valves and not so much to do with the oil itself or what he's going to start pitching in this. Scotty likes to do his snake oil and claim that he gets to something such and such, and he gets a little kickback on it and it cures a problem instantly. It's not normally the case. Usually, it's very rarely that these little additives actually have a massive effect. Maybe a good preventative, but not going to fix your problem. So let's continue on. Also, please don't forget to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, hit notifications, and also hit the like if you like these videos, and comment down below. It helps out with the algorithm for the for YouTube, trying to get it out a bit more. If you agree with me, then please let me know. If you disagree with me, then go ahead, comment. I'm willing to have a discussion, but make it relevant. Don't be just bad mouthing or saying a bunch of just running me down for no reason. If you have a valid argument, great. I'm all up for that. But let's make it a valid argument. I've sometimes get some hate, and it just doesn't actually contribute to anything. So yeah, please, subscribe. I'd like to get some subscriptions up and see if we can get this out a bit more. All right, let's go.
Oil, and here's why. In order for engines to get better gas mileage, all cars use lower tension piston rings these days. We'd rebuild engines, you had to get a piston. You had to clamp it down, put it on top of the block, and then hammer it in with wood and a hammer. Because it's so tight, the pistons were tight. They had very high tension rings, so they were tight and they sealed good. But of course, more friction, worse gas mileage. So they all have low tension springs. You can push those in with your bare hand. If you ever rebuild one of those, you can grab the rings with your fingers. You can push the whole thing in. You don't need tools. You don't need a hammer and wood. That's less pressure. They don't seal as well. And as they age, if oil gets clogged in there, they'll stick inside the pistons. The rings won't come out because they don't have much tension. You'll burn a lot of oil. Now,
all right, on that subject there, actually Scotty's a bit wrong when it comes to that. Old engines, I've rebuilt loads and loads of engines. I did it when I was young. I was very young. I went all through high school. I rebuilt anything from old Ford engines, old Chevy 350s. I've done 4-cylinder. You name it, I've done it. I've done loads, right, to modern engines and stuff like that. I worked at Land Rover for a while, and we used to work with engines. Some of the 3-liter diesels had issues with the crank would snap because it had to do with the oil pickup and the oil pump having issues and stuff like that. But and there's a recall for that. So yeah, I've done stuff like that. When he's talking old engines, the tolerances weren't quite as tight. So your piston and your cylinder, they weren't quite as tight as they are nowadays. A lot of the newer engines, the materials are different. They're not using cast iron blocks anymore. And the tolerances are much smaller and tighter, which is why you have a lot more thinner oils nowadays. That's why you're running like something like 0.20 oil instead of like back in 1540 oil, or very common back in the day it was like 1030 oil, right? That's which nowadays even some of the bigger diesel engines are running 530 oil. So it's tolerant. So when he's talking about that, he's not even talking the oil rings. He's talking the compression rings on a cylinder, on a piston. Sorry, and you'll see there's two lands, and there's two compression rings that have to sit, and then in the bottom of it you have your oil rings. And oil rings are actually always have been. They're really thin. They're dead easy. When he's talking about having to use compression tools to compress the rings on the cylinder on the piston. He's talking about that was actually for the compression rings. So it was never for the oil rings. Oil rings, there's two oil rings in between. They had this little bit that went up and down, like a little wavy bit went all the way around. And that traps oil inside and it lubricates the cylinder up and down. The oil are already always has gone past a little bit. There's a tiny bit of oil that's always kind of sits on your cylinder. And your cylinder, in fact, will have a cross hatching all the way up and down. And that holds on a very thin layer of oil. and it's how it's supposed to be. If it scraped all the oil off as it went down, then those rings, the compression rings and stuff, would just gouge the living tar out of the cylinders. So it's always been like that. It's designed to be like that, or else you just wouldn't have the proper lubrication. What he's talking is that it's because the rings are going to be slightly smaller on the other modern engine, and they actually have something on them that they didn't have before, which is like a moly coating. It's like a I've continued on now. I had an emergency call that I had to take care of. So I was saying about moly coating. There's a coating. It's like a very low friction coating that's on a lot of these rings, and so that kind of helps reduce the drag a little bit and the wear on the compression rings and stuff on the pistons. Also, I said as they're using different materials now. We have better metallurgy than we did back in the day. So the blocks they move different. The old cast iron blocks, they would absorb a lot of heat. They soak up quite a bit of heat, and they would move and they'd expand. So you had to have larger tolerances to allow for that expansion of the cylinder between that and the piston. Also, the pistons are a different material as well, and heavier as well. Some of the old ones are a lot heavier. Nowadays, the blocks are made of different stuff. They're a lot lighter. They don't soak up as much heat. They also have ones, you have like an open block design. If you look inside, instead of being solid, you'll have like sleeves. Example, I think give you examples. Dodge did it in the 2-liter Neons, and there's some other ones. I think some of the new V8s are like that. Another one's like Lotus has it in their back in the day in the 1.8K series. It was a very similar. In fact, that there has the head bolts go from the very top of the engine to the very, very bottom and hold the oil rail on the bottom, and they're stupidly long, and it holds the whole block together. But that was an open design. That was almost more closer to like a race engine, how it was. And it's, if you look up the 1.8K series and the history, it's quite an interesting engine. Unfortunately, government got involved and messed up, and it was never designed fully how it should have been done. But that's a different story. I mean, I'll again make a video on that, on the K series and the 1.8 and stuff like that, and the modern one nowadays, which is called the N series. Because of that, one thing that also manufacturers are doing is that to reduce, not so much with what Scotty's saying about the tight rings on the pistons and stuff like that. And really on that subject, why they had that is because they had tolerances weren't quite as tight. They had to have these bigger rings to maintain compression until the vehicle got up to operating temperature. And then because of the expansion of the block, expansion of the pistons, then it would take up those tolerances. But you had to have thicker oil. You had to have this the tolerances were wider, and they had these bigger rings. The pistons are a lot heavier. In fact, now they're doing a lot more shorter pistons. They're lighter, so that's where you're getting more economical engines, because there's not as much rotating mass. In fact, Hyundai, I worked there for a while, they had a problem with some of the Elantras in which they made the pistons too short, and the skirts are too short, and started having the piston rattle. We called it the Elantra death rattle. And that was a short block. It had to replace the whole bottom end of the engine because it just obviously chewed up the cylinders, the pistons, and everything else got chewed up. So instead of rebuilding it, because nowadays it's not as economical, you just replace the bottom end and call it the short block. And you come with the pistons, the crank, everything's all there, and you take off everything off the old engine, head and everything else, put it on, new gaskets, everything like that. Or you can get like a tall block, which has the head. This is on top, and that's and then you'd have to just take everything off the side of the engine and put it on, right? It's like you can buy something like that from like the scrapyard and stuff if you want a used engine, or you can get everything on top. It just depends. But it's a lot more economical just nowadays. They don't rebuild engines so much. You go get yourself a short block for the time and effort and all the stuff, materials to rebuild the engine yourself. You're much better, and it's more economical, and it makes more business sense just to get a short block. So, but like I said, so they're making them a lot lighter, a lot less rotating mass and stuff. So it's not the same. So he's talking crap.
Now, this may sound crazy. They spent over $1 million and 8 years figuring out how to get rid of carbon inside the engine. They say the carbon inside the engine with the oil is different than the carbon that's made by burning gasoline. This pours right into your engine oil.
Right, but change the scenery here, had some things to do. But when he's talking about the stuff he's selling there, just a short one, that's essentially just an engine oil cleaner. It's just that if your oil has been left for a long time, and it gets a lot of stuff in it, like a lot of dirt. So that has said fuel, because fuel will actually dilute into the oil, and different gunk and stuff that builds up. It will build up. And if you've done that, or you put that stuff in, it's just an engine flush, really. It's just an engine cleaner is all that is. It's nothing really special.
Oil. That baby's on there tight. Either that or I'm getting old. Pour the engine oil. We're going to see if it really works. A whole can. And now we're going to run it at a fast idle for about 15 minutes. We'll idle at about 2,000 RPMs for about 15 minutes. Now I've read about phenomenal results, but I might as well be from Missouri, because I say show me. This is going to test this system out good. And as usual, nobody's paying me for this. This is just a test. If it doesn't work, I'll show you. The engine will be just as noisy as it was before. Maybe it'll be even noisier. I don't know. We're going to run it for 15 minutes. Then, like they say on a can, change the oil and filter, because all the carbon's going to be in the oil and in the filter. Put in new oil. We'll see what it sounds like.
It's funny he says he's not being paid for it, yet he knows the guy personally, he knows the company, he knows them quite well, and he's actually pitching a name brand. So you can see he's not being paid for it, but I'm suspicious, very suspicious. Like I said, if he knows the guy personally, probably a mate, he's probably going to be a bit of a kickback. He's just not going to say it.
And interestingly enough, even though I put in the engine oil, I can smell it coming out of the tailpipe. That shows the engine and the exhaust, they're not perfectly sealed. The engine oil should not be coming out fumes of the exhaust. That shows piston rings and stuff are worn. We're going to see if this clears.
Actually, that shows right there, that little statement of his saying that you shouldn't be able to smell a little bit of the oil or whatever the additive you put in. Apparently you can smell it. I find that hard to believe. If you're burning stuff up, it's not going to smell the same. How is it going to smell that way if it is going through into the exhaust? It's certainly not going through the exhaust, into the exhaust manifold or through the exhaust port. The only way you can get into this exhaust, through the exhaust valve, is if it goes to the combustion chamber. So I highly doubt that he's going to smell it going through there. Saying that there is something called a PCV system, a positive crankcase ventilation system. You have to have that, because you do always going to have blow by of a little bit in any engine, no matter what. No engine with the rings is going to be 100% perfectly sealed. It's never happened. It's not happened. It's impossible, right? You're going to have pressures. A little bit of pressure is going to leak past. It's just the way they are, right? They're not 100% perfect. So if he knew this, if he was a mechanic of 50 odd years, he'd know that, right? I'm a mechanic of 26 years. And I know that. I knew that when I was an apprentice. Saying that, so if you can smell that, well, it's going to go through the PCV system, because it vents the positive crankcase, which is the blow-by, and the extra pressure that builds up in the crankcase, which is the oil pan, has to be vented. Goes up through the vents, goes through the usually through the valve cover, goes into the intake, because you don't want to nowadays. The old vehicles used to have like a little vent or a little valve or like a little filter, and it just vented the atmosphere. Well, you're venting. They found out they're venting, gases and stuff like that. They're emissions. So now they put it through the engine. So it goes up into the intake, runs through the intake, goes through, gets added into the into your air charge going through the intake, and is added back into the combustion chamber. So if he is smelling it, and that's only if, I highly doubt that, especially in advanced years, your nose doesn't get quite as good as it used to be. He's smelling because it's going through the PCV system, Scotty. It's not that hard, okay? It's going to go through the PCV system because it's coming from the freaking crankcase. So just once again, this is another example showing how little Scotty Kilmer actually knows about automotive design, basic designs and basic mechanical parts of the engine. So I'm sorry, but yeah, if he is, well, yeah, it's going to go through there because it's going through the PCV system, Scotty. It's not that hard.
Clear some of it up. I do have to say, over the years, I've seen a lot of snake oil products, but after testing out their fuel additive, I was rather impressed by that. The same guys in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, I've known Bernie Thompson quite some time at Automotive Test Solutions. As far as I'm concerned, the guy's almost as crazy as me, but his partner is a computer whiz. Between the testing and him coming up with ideas, I can't wait to see what this oil cleaner does, especially on a Volkswagen. Obviously, rings are worn because you can smell the stuff burning out the back. You still gotta wait 15 minutes though at a fast idle. But I do have to say, I asked Bernie, I said, Bernie, how come only 15 minutes? He says, doesn't take forever, but in that short period of time, the engine starts idling faster. I got it set with the throttle holder. I had it at 2,000. It went up to 4,000. That shows me that it's cleaning something because it's freer moving now. For the same throttle, it went up. I had to set it back to 2,000. I can hear it going up a little higher now too. I don't know. I think the cleaner's doing something. But as for sound, is it gonna?
Wow. Scotty's really trying to sell it there, or he just doesn't know. But the reason those RPMs probably went up is either one, the engine's warmed up, and now it's a hot engine actually runs more efficient when it's running at operating temperature, and you get a better stoichiometric ratio. So the engine is going to become more efficient, and so the RPMs have climbed up a bit. Or it's a drive-by-wire system, and the PCM's actually adjusted a bit because you're keeping the RPMs at a certain level with no load on it. But it's expecting to have a load on it because the PCM can actually control the throttle plate. It's also a turbocharged engine, so the turbo section, because it's spooling up like that, it's warming up a bit, and it's everything's kind of freeing up, everything's expanding, or the oil is actually maybe thinning down a lot more. A lot of those cleaners, what they essentially do is they thin your oil down. They make it a lot thinner, and it flows faster. And then what it kind of does is this grabs some of the particles, or usually, a bit of dirt and stuff like that does get into your system, into your engine. And you'd be surprised what you see in engines. You think engines are like completely sealed. They're not. I've seen bugs and stuff come out of engines that have oil, when I've done oil change and stuff like that. You'd be surprised what comes out. It's but that's the whole point of an oil filter, and usually the pickup has a screen on it. The pickup on the screen, and the pickup takes big chunks out, and then the filter takes the smaller stuff out. And you'd be surprised you can get, sometimes you get like little bits of metal and stuff like that. And it's naturally, it's usually a very, very small amount. And if you get too much, then the engine is destroying itself. Or this vehicle, who knows? Like, one thing he never did is he never checked oil when he first got into it. He never checked the level of the oil, and he never checked to see when the service info was. So you can see it's more noisier, but the engine oil is past due, and it's over diluted. That's going, and it's just it's past where it should have been done, and it's going to be more, or it's low. Then it's going to be more louder. It's going to be more of a clackier engine because it's not getting lubrication it should need. So he's claiming this stuff is like helping it out. No, it's not the way it works. I've used stuff like this loads of times because there's something in dealerships to do upsell, and sometimes it's helpful. I've seen sometimes engine comes up a bit cleaner, a bit nicer. Engine oil stays clean a bit longer, but it's all, it's a little selling point, a little maintenance thing if you want to do, but it's not going to fix problems. It's more of preventative maintenance.
Going to make the engine quieter because of that? Let's find out. Now shut the engine off, we're going to change the oil, but this is really hot, so get a fan. Cool it off 15-20 minutes so you don't burn yourself when you're changing the oil. So it's cooling off, we jack the car up. Up we go. And this is a really low car, so we need a jack stand. So get our oil pan and crawl under. So we get a 19mm socket, and out comes the old oil. Germans really put long screws in these things. There we go. There's the old dirty oil. And it is dirty. As you can see in my hand, that's dirty oil.
Two things I want to point out there. For one, he's got the car jacked up only on one side. And he's finally used jack stand, which doesn't like to use. No matter how low the car is or how high it is, use a jack stand. Don't rely on hydraulics. Never rely on hydraulics. Right? They can fail. You got now a 2-ton vehicle falling on your head. It's not very fun. But he's got it jacked up only on one side. Now, I've worked on these vehicles loads of times. I've worked on the GTIs. I've worked on the TDIs. I've worked on the the GTs. I've worked on the R32s. Where the oil drain is like in the middle of the sump on the back. So now he's got it jacked up on one side. He's not actually draining out all the oil out of the pan. There's still going to be some of that cleaner in there, which you don't want to have in there because it'll thin your oil down. And it's it's not the greatest lubricant itself. That's why you have to add it to the oil, not run it on this stuff. And also you got the dirty oil in there. So any contaminants and stuff in the dirty oil that we don't have out, we're gonna have more in there than it probably should. Also, when you fill up the oil, if you just, and some people do this, they look up the spec, drop it in, go, right? You can actually be over, and that can actually cause problems with seals and rings and stuff like that if your oil level is too high. And especially something like a turbocharged engine, high performance engine, for what it is. Yeah, it's him having it like that. You should have jacked up both sides, had it evenly, and then even from the front end up a little bit. That's fine because it's going to drain out the back, and you'll just get that much oil out. It'll drain a little faster, and you'll get more complete. It's fine. But have it up on one side, that means all the oils run off to one side a little bit. It's going to drain out, and you're still going to have some in there. And that's, once again, amateur move. Also, if you look at the quality of oil that came out, that is super thin oil. Like, that's really, really dirty. It's been there for a long time, and that's super diluted. So I think the problem with this vehicle is that it's just gone past the service interval. That customers drove it, and looking at the vehicle, it looks like some young kid, some young fella is driving it. And he's probably just kind of left it a bit too long and then took it to Scotty because he's pretty cheap. And Scotty probably did it for free or something like that. So yeah, I would say the big problem with this car is simply because it just needs an oil and filter change. And bin off that's whatever that stuff he's put in there, it's probably not going to have done anything different. He's going to start it up. It's going to sound nice and lovely. Why? Fresh oil and fresh filter. That's all. That's all I needed.
All the carbon and stuff is getting in this oil that we're changing out. Drained out, you are going to get a couple of drips. We got a new gasket on here. We'll put that back on. And of course, we have to change the oil filter. It's one of these stupid crap box plastic ones with the paper filter inside. You need a big socket for this. Okay, now we can do it by hand. I really hate these ones that have paper inside. They're such a pain in the butt. But that's the Germans for it.
He also complains in this about the oil filter housing, which is a plastic. It's a plastic housing and holds a paper air filter, oil filter inside. That's a very, very common thing on most manufacturers. That's what they're doing now. It has to do with this manufacturing costs and such like that. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know why they exactly have done that. But he cusses out the German and goes, "Oh, that's the Germans for you." Yeah, has he ever done the Toyota Lexus one yet? You need a special one, a special cup for the plastic filter, or else they snap and they crush. And I've seen it happen before. Some lubie somewhere, Quick Lube, has done it, and I've seen them crack. And because they have to have a special little like cutouts in it that holds on to it. You don't actually grab the bottom; it grabs those cutouts. These little notches that stick down. And Lexus, Toyota, he's fabled, "Oh, Toyota can't do anything wrong." Yeah, there's some of the worst ones. But almost all the car manufacturers now all have those filters. Very, very rarely do you find a canister filter anymore with like the metal spin-on ones. That's pretty much a thing of the past. So him cussing out one, "Oh, it's the Germans for you." Nope, they're Japanese, are just as freaking bad.
For you. Plastic junk. There we go. Here's the new filter and gasket. So we put the new filter and gasket in, tighten it up. First you tighten it by hand, then you get the wrench. Because you want it snug so it doesn't come loose and leak. There we go. And a little tight. That's it. Look at that filthy black oil. Seems to got a lot of carbon out. Now we'll fill it up with oil. In this case it holds 4.9 quarts of 5W30. So in it goes. Nice clean oil. Then we'll put the top back on. Move the jack stand and let it down. Jack out of the way. Now comes the moment of truth. We're going to start it up. On your mark. Get set. Go! So let's compare that to the original sound. Now, yeah.
And the quieter because he's done an oil and filter change. His stuff, I 100% guarantee you, and I would put money on it, if I did the exact same service on that and not put that stuff he's trying to hawk, that snake oil stuff he's trying to throw in there, I probably had the exact same result, and I probably would have saved the customer 20, 30, $40 or however, wherever you're from. So no, that hasn't solved it. He's going, oh, this stuff solved it. Nah, your oil and filter solved it. That stuff probably didn't do anything other than it may have helped clean a little bit up, but it wouldn't have affected the sound of the engine. No, Scotty, I'm sorry. Your stuff, it didn't do jack shit. Sorry. Nope, not having it.
Yes, this is a Volkswagen GTI with well over 100,000 miles on it. It's gonna make noise. It's been abused in the past. Guys drive them hard, and they're Volkswagens. They get loud as they age. I'd never buy one personally. That's my choice. I fix cars. I don't like a noisy car. I like nice, quiet Toyotas. If you compare that last noise after the cleaning to the first real noisy one, you can definitely hear there's less mechanical noise. There's less wear going on. I got a RAV4, and all of a sudden it's getting worse gas mileage. Used to go over 300 miles a tank, now it's 250. So what's gone wrong? We'll check the air filter. Now it does have one of these K&N filters, but as you can see with the sun coming through, it's not dirty. So we're gonna check under the hood here, get inside the car, plug in the OBD port, turn it on. And while that's warming up, let's check the mileage. Okay, it's got 259,232 miles on it. Now that's an awful lot of miles. So let's check out the data stream here. The Toyota, go to automatic selection. It's new enough it should easily read it. See if it's all right. It's decoding it. And without smart key, here we go, RAV4. Yep, it's got the engine, it's got everything on it. So here we go. Do diagnostics, auto scan, and let it scan away. No check engine light on, but the tire pressure monitoring system's on, but that's not going to affect the gas mileage.
Did he just seriously say that a tire pressure monitoring system lights being on? Now, normally they're on solid. That normally means that one or more tire pressures are lower than spec, than what the vehicle wants to see. So if he's saying that TPMS lights being on will not affect gas mileage, just think that for a second. So low tire pressures will not affect your gas mileage. Did Scotty really say that? Are you joking with me? I mean, think about it for a second. Tire pressure's low. It's going to not affect my gas mileage. Wow. Really?
See here, the only faults are the tire pressure monitoring system. It's all.
Now, as I said, he's found faults, he thinks are faults, in tire pressure monitoring system. Obviously, Scotty doesn't look at them. He doesn't like TPMS. He thinks it's a waste of time. It's not, because most people, if you see that, you'll know your tire pressures are low. It stops from having blowouts on the highway. It also stops and helps keeping your fuel mileage better, and so emissions are lower, and it's better for the environment. So he's seen two faults. Now, anybody who's a technician and knows anything, like myself, who's an actual properly trained technician, actually knows what he's talking about, a TPMS, if you scan it, TPMS system will flag faults, and when you go in and look at those faults, which Scotty fails to do because he doesn't give a crap, it'll say tire pressure low on left front tire and right rear tire, or whatever tires are low, and it logs those as faults, which then flags the TPMS light to come on. If the TPMS light was flashing, then that indicates a fault with the system, i.e. batteries low when the sensors being damaged, or a wire to one of the antennas being damaged, or TPMS module itself, you're having a fault, or having CAN bus, whatever. But when it's flashing, there's a fault. Solid on, most likely 9 times out of 10, low tire pressure. Low tire pressures mean fuel economy is affected. Oh, look, simple, holy crap. I am 5,000 miles away and I've diagnosed it already.
Old, I'm sure the batteries have worn up. We don't care about that. But we're going to go to the engine system here. We're going to analyze the data. So we go to live data and up it comes. All right, we'll turn the AC off. We'll put it in gear. That's how you can check the mass airflow sensor. And it's like 2.5. It's pretty good. It's about the same size as the engine, which is what it should be. So that sensor's working correctly. You always want to do it in drive with the AC turned off. But I'm turning it back on because I'm hot. And we'll start analyzing everything else. Engine speed, that all looks good so far. Battery voltage is good. Now we got the short term, and it's adding a tiny amount of fuel, 0, but it keeps changing. It's subtracting, it's now at 0, subtracting again. Long-term fuel trim, it's adding fuel. Now you can see it's subtracting a reasonable amount of fuel. So it's messing with the fuel injectors. You can see.
All right, so on fuel trims, because obviously Scotty doesn't actually know what he's looking at or how to read it properly. Sorry. Fuel trims, if you look at them, the short term is going to always adjust. It's going up and down, up and down, up and down, because the engine is trying to maintain something called stoichiometric ratio, which is the optimum fuel ratio, fuel to air ratio, about 14.1 to 1, I believe, is what you want. And the engine, the PCM, is trying to affect that. So it's going to move fuel trims up and down, right? It's gonna be trying to get this, depending on how much air is drawn in, the K&N may not be affecting it. Now he's seen this video, obviously. He's going to try to say that the K&N has affected the mass airflow, which they sometimes do. People over oil them, don't do it properly. The oil, and sometimes even not. The oil can get onto the mass airflow, and it cools. It has a little heating element and cools them down and causes them to read improperly. But he's already said that the mass airflow is reading correctly, so it's not the case. And if he did think it's the case, he needs to test it before just randomly go, oh, it must be this. With no proof. He's not no proof. He already live data is showing this is operating as it should. So there's got to be a way of proving it if he thinks. Which that's what you'll see. That's where he's going to go. But he's thinking, oh, it's affecting the injectors. Fuel trims, you'll see, if you look at that, he's saying that the short term is a bit negative and it's going to 0, so it's fine. And then you see the long term should stay where it is. It's slightly one way and is like slightly positive or slightly negative. How you read that properly, if you know what you're looking at, is that if you look at the, say, short term's positive by, let's say, 2, and then long term is negative 2. Well, that's 0. That's, you look at the 2, because it happens, the long term is like, it'll go up, short term will go up to a certain point. Let's just say increments of, like, go up to 10. And then once it hits 10, then this is all done calculations, then the long term will adjust that. And it's adjusting the fuel air because how much the throttle plate is affected, because it's going to be driven by wire most likely, or it's going to have an electronically controlled throttle plate, and it's going and it's more going to be for, like, it may have like this electronic idle control, and it may be wire. I had to look at the engine a bit closer, and I can't remember what year he said, but so it'll affect how much air that's in, because most likely it's going to worry more about, like, idle, higher RPMs, things like that. Engines working faster, it affects it less. But so it'll obviously adjust the injector pulse and stuff like that. But if it's within that, if you see plus and negative is 0, it means that the PCM is maintaining stoichiometric ratio, which means the engine is running at as optimum, as efficient as it can be, as designed. Which that means this is not affecting his MPG, because the engine is compensating is fine. Right? It's not running rich or lean. It's within tolerances. Now, if one of those, let's say negative, let's say the long term was like 10, and then you see in the short term is like 5, and they're both positive, well, then the engine's running rich. Or if they're both negative, actually no, the engine will be running positive, which means it's adding fuel, which means the engine's running lean. Or if it's negative and the engine's pulling fuel, then which means the engine's running rich. Right? It has to be like a lot. If it's only like 1 or 2, but if you look at the two numbers and they're one's plus and one's negative and about the same, then you're fine. The engine's running fine, so it's not affecting it. He thinks it is. It's not. He's talking crap. And it's mainly because the man doesn't know what he's looking at. He does not understand modern vehicles. Maybe throw a carburetor at him, he might be able to adjust it. Maybe. I don't know. I have my serious doubts. I've done carb adjustments. I know. I cut my teeth on the freaking 1980 freaking Chevy 350 with Cheyenne, right? I worked on one of those since I was 12. I've done everything on that thing. I know that I had a an 81 Chevy Citation. I messed around with racing and stuff like that. Carbureted 2.8. I messed around. I know all this stuff. I know how to adjust stuff, all that. I've done that stuff. I know I can. I'm trained on it. I get trained every single year.
See, the air-fuel ratio is bouncing around quite a bit. 0.98, 0.90. It's moving around a little here and there. 9.2. Now I'm going to turn the AC off again, and we'll watch the airflow sensor. Now you can see the airflow sensor, 3.3, 3.26. It's moving around a little. It's not totally stable. First educated guess is I would replace the airflow sensor on this vehicle with the Toyota original one. We'll look at.
Okay, so on this here, Scotty's talking about the air-fuel ratio from the air-fuel sensor. What he's looking at there is a very, very small movement in the voltage. I think if you hear him quote it, he's going, oh, it's 3 point, this, and then it goes up to 3 point that and 3 point this. Those sensors operate between 2.9 and 3.3 volts or thereabouts. So the movement he's seeing is a very, very, very small movement in the voltage. Maybe only, look at it, you're only looking at a point, couple, 0.0, 2, 3, 4, maybe a 0.3 voltage, which is only very, very tiny. It's only a little tiny ripple. So what he's talking about there, it's normal operation. There's nothing wrong with that. That movement's fine. He thinks it's a lot of movement because unfortunately he doesn't know what he's looking at. He doesn't know how to interpret the data properly. He's also talking about maybe he thinks maybe it's injectors. He mentions injectors. If there's an injector fault, if you have a lack of, you either have a misfire, and it wouldn't be like a spark plug or like a misfire, or it'd have a power problem. The vehicle would be steam underpowered, it'd be running lumpy, stuff like that. Especially if they just say you thought injectors were firing wrong, then the customer's complaint would be that the vehicle's lacking power, the vehicle's running rough. But it's not. The customer's complaint is that he's getting 50 miles per tank less. So instead of getting 300 miles a tank, he's getting 250 miles per tank. But like I pointed out in the beginning, I think it's down to tire pressures. But Scotty has just completely pastored over that, even though it's like staring him in the face, look at his fault codes, or look at his light on. He doesn't even bother to look. Nor does he bother to look and see, he looks at the air filter. Oh, look, it's got a K9 air filter, but doesn't check the oil level, because that can affect fuel mileage as well. If you're not getting proper lubrication, then you're not getting the engine's not getting it's got more drag. It's working harder because it's not lubricated properly. As well as other factors. What are the tires like? Are they are they running snow tires? So snow tires are a bit more softer, more grippier. They can affect fuel mileage, especially but where he is, not snow tires, or just tires in general. They have aggressive tires, aggressive tread. That actually can affect fuel mileage. But yeah, what he's looking at there, that's normal operation. That's fine. That small movement is completely fine, and it's normal. So and the same thing with the upstream O2 sensor. That going up and down is fine. That's normal operation.
Look at other data. You can see the oxygen sensor is moving around quite a bit. Keeps trying to change to acclimate to make it run right.
All right, now Scotty is talking about your O2 sensors, right? And you're going to have an upstream O2 sensor and a downstream O2 sensor. And you're saying, oh, look, the O2 sensor is going up and down, up and down. Obviously, Scotty doesn't know how these work, okay? Upstream O2 sensors, when it's gone into closed loop, it will go up and down. That's how it's designed, okay? Upstream, well, if you looked at a graph, like a line graph, it would go up, it would be doing this, right? At idle, up and down, like it would be going along. And then if you revved it, it would go, depending on how the sensor is, it'll shoot up and maybe stay like that for a while because it'll go rich, all right, and then it'll shoot down and go and then stay with the same amount, and it'll go up and down again, and it's called closed loop, right? that's how they're designed. Okay, now a downstream O2 sensor, the only purpose really for that is it keeps an eye on the catalytic converter. If that one there should go up to a certain temperature and should stay there, it should be a nice flat line, it shouldn't move. If that's going up and down, then that means your catalytic converter is not filtering properly, and you'll see this, both sensors, they'll almost mirror each other. Then that's normally a sign that your catalytic converter is gone. That's the only purpose of a downstream O2 sensor, is to keep an eye on the catalytic converter. Upstream O2 sensor affects the fuel trims. That is what the engine is looking to see, what's coming out the exhaust, and is gauging, is trying to maintain the stoichiometric ratio. So it's moving up and down. It's going rich and lean, rich and lean, rich and lean. You know, and you watch it. Some of them, if you look at data PID, sometimes it'll just go rich, lean, rich, lean, rich, lean, rich, lean, rich. That's what it's doing. It's just going up and down. All right, now that's a narrow band O2 sensor. Then you get into wide band O2 sensors, and they'll go up and down as well, but they'll go up and down. There's smaller ones and bigger ones and smaller ones, and they'll go all over the place. And that's a lot. That's a lot more different and a little bit more. You know, what he's talking there, it sounds like a narrow band O2 sensor. So it's what he's talking there, that's normal operation. That's what they're supposed to do, right? That's okay. That's a sign of it's operating. So Scotty, once again, maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about. And if he does, then he's trying to dupe you people. I'm sorry, but anybody who watches this and believes what he's talking about, he's just talking a lot of rubbish.
You can see the port injector. The data is moving around quite a bit. With the injector volume, it's staying relatively stable. 0.104, 0.105. It's still moving around a little. The firing of it, it's getting somewhat erratic. With all the mileage on this thing, I'm thinking, something's going on with the fuel injection system.
Like I said before, if there's a problem with the fuel injection system, the vehicle will be having rough run issues, lack of power issues, and other issues, as well as he was seeing the fuel trim numbers would have not been right. They wouldn't have, one short term wouldn't have been slightly negative, long term would have been slightly positive, and it would have been equal to around zero. You would have seen a lot more. Say the injectors weren't firing enough. You would have seen that everything would have been positive, especially long term and negative and short term. Everything, both of them have been quite positive, and because it wasn't trying to add fuel, or if one was stuck open, it would have the fuel trim numbers would have been negative because we're trying to draw back fuel. So it's not injector issues. What he's seeing was moving a lot. You can remember this is a vehicle with almost 250,000 miles on it. Right, those cam lobes are going to be slightly worn a little bit. The valves and everything. So each cylinder is going to probably draw a slightly different amount of fuel charge. The computer can kind of sense this. It can, it has different ways of knowing it. It can sense the speed of the crankshaft. It can sense. So you can adjust each one of those injectors so that each cylinder is firing what it should. It has the right ratio, fuel air charge ratio. So it will adjust. It can adjust. It has adjustment. This vehicle is a lot more smarter than you think. Like back in the day, the old carbureted engines, or even the throttle body injected engines, where it just pretty much just dumped it in, and each cylinder, and then fired it, and it was what it was. These are a lot more. You can find the computer can fine tune itself, and it's for emissions and for obviously performance of the vehicle. You want it more efficiently. It runs the less emissions, and the more happier and the better the vehicle is. So him seeing those injector numbers moving a little bit, well, each time it depends on how much air charge it's getting. It depends on how the fuel, but he also said he's seen where some numbers for the injectors were the same for the flow. Well, then that's probably an indication that it's probably just within tolerances. I mean, what Scotty needs to do is he needs to start looking up these things. I'll look up what's the gap, because it'll be a range, normal operating range of these components. Let's say injectors. And just a little bit of research. Not every mechanic is going to know every single little tiny thing about every single vehicle. Scotty looks at me, he does, but he doesn't. It's impossible. It's just there's too many variables. I mean, you may know everything about, you know, a RAV4 from, you know, from 2000 2005, but you go from 2006 to 2009, and then, well, they've changed the injection system, they've changed the emission system, they've changed stuff like that. You're not going to know. So here's all the information could be different. You know, maybe they changed the injectors, changed the intake, you know, the intake runners. Who knows, right? So you'll never know everything about every single vehicle. As much as they try to make out 50 years or not, I don't care. No mechanic knows everything. So if he's assuming the stuff, but it's like I say, it's false and wrong information that he's basing it on. So I would think, this from my general idea, but you can have a general idea. I would think from everything else, all the symptoms, to look at the whole picture, it sounds like that. Not, I seriously doubt. In fact, I'd put money on my reputation on it's not the injectors in that. There's nothing wrong with the injection system in that. And the only way is, if you want to prove me wrong, take it out for a test drive, show me live data, show me the you know, going up, putting the vehicle into, put your foot down for through first or second gear or something like that, and let's see the fuel trim numbers. Let's just see them go. Watch and see what happens. Let's see the RPMs. Let's see other things. But as you said, there's no codes, and when you don't diagnose a vehicle off the codes, it can kind of give you an idea of what the computer is seeing, and there's nothing. And in his live data, he's misinterpreting a lot of the information, and including that's unfortunately, he's misread that information, and I think this goes down to lack of knowledge on his part.
It's making it get somewhat worse gas mileage. I personally would buy an OEM mass airflow sensor, and then I would run a full fuel injector cleaner. These Toyota injectors are pretty good, but with all this mileage on it, was it 259,000 miles? The cleaner might make the injectors work better. Injectors are supposed to spray a perfectly upside down conical shape. As they age, they'll spurter around and you'll lose any kind of perfect spray pattern, and your gas mileage will go down.
So now Scotty's pretty much, as he does very, very, very often, using what I like to call guess gnostics. He guesses at something without actually having any real proof, or doing any comprehensive or actually any testing. Let's say he's looked at a few data PIDs that he's misinterpreted because from his lack of knowledge, and now has decided that he's going to call that it needs a mass airflow sensor, which, quite frankly, I think if the customer replaces a mass airflow sensor, they're going to have the same problem. But if they take it to a dealership or a reputable mechanics garage, they won't. And why? Is because they'll probably top up the tire pressures, and then the fuel economy issue will go away. And if they're decent, a proper decent mechanic, they'll check over all the stuff. They'll probably look at the customer's complaint, and they'll probably say Scotty Kilmer has diagnosed this. And if it was me, I'd be like, all right, fine, great. But from my point, to cover my butt and cover myself, I still want an hour's diagnosis on this. And then I would start all over diagnosing the vehicle as if Scotty Kilmer never touched it. And I would do it with any vehicle. Anybody brought a vehicle in, unless it was somebody I personally knew, and I knew their work ethic and I knew their diagnostics. Like, I have a few friends that if they brought a vehicle to me and said, look, hey, I looked at this and I've diagnosed this, I'd be like, all right, sound like, I've worked with you. I know your methods. I know that if you say that's what it needs, that's what it needs, because I personally know them. But if anybody else brought it from another garage, somebody said, Joe down the road at his garage diagnosis and it needs a catalytic converter, I'd be like, all right, okay, well, and why isn't Joe doing it? Oh, blah, blah, blah. I'd be like, okay, well, for my peace of mind and to cover my own tail, I still want to diagnose it myself. I want to go over, check everything, and because it's if I replace that part and it doesn't fix the problem, then customers coming back to me and going, you didn't fix my vehicle, and then I'd have to turn around and say, well, Joe diagnosed it down the road and I just replaced what he said, and now but it didn't fix it, but it'd be on me. They'd be like, well, you're the one who fixed it, you need to fix this, now I want you to do it for free. And it often happens a lot of times with customers. They get something like that, they diagnose it themselves. And it's just through my over 20 years experience to know, look, okay, I great, you diagnosed it, and I'll definitely, I'll take this as a starting point. I'll have that in the back of my mind, but I want to do my own diagnostics, because then if it were to go wrong, then I know it's on me and I can own it. But if I just start throwing parts at it and this be a parts changer, then I leave myself open to something happening. And maybe Joe was right down the road and it needs a catalytic converter and he's fine. I can say, okay, yeah. And if they see it's fine, and I go, okay, yeah, and I only looked at 15 minutes, I probably would either just take it on the chin and not to charge hours diagnostic, or if it's an hour and I was feeling as a good customer of mine, and maybe I didn't have time to look at the vehicle, then, up to the shop owner. I've heard sometimes shops will, after you get the work done, they'll take that hour and put it towards the replacement of the part, especially if there's some strip down and stuff, and you already had to do a bunch of work anyways to get into it. Then you go, you know what, I'll just take that hour, I'll just knock that hour off of the repair. Depends, but that's down to the mechanic of the shop. That's, not saying that's a common thing. And I would think that most of the time, like if you do your hours diagnostic and then they pay you to do the thing, and you get your book time. So you're paying for the hours and hours and years and years and years of experience and training, and you get what you pay for. If you want the kid down the road who's just fresh out of technical school, working on your vehicle, and he's done some theory and that's it, and your charge is half the price, then fine. But if you want someone who's experienced, who's doing it for a long time, and you get quality workmanship, you got to pay for it. So that's a different subject. But there's a few different mechanics I work with that we all feel the same way. You pay for what you get, right? So you need to pay for. Going to some guy in his driveway, like Mr. Kilmer, he's probably not charging a lot, but then you can see what you get. You get that guessnostics. You get somebody who's guessing and goes, "Oh, I'll throw this OEM part at it," and then when it doesn't fix it, then they'll probably go, "Oh, well, the vehicle's got 250,000 miles on it, so that's just the way it is, and you're just gonna have to deal with it," and doesn't look further into it. So, but like I said, I've already diagnosed that car. I'm not even there. My first guess would be tire pressures. Maybe a dragging brake, but yeah, he's wrong on that. I'll also point out, and I pointed out earlier in this video, gasoline is actually a very, very good cleaner, and a very good dissolvent, and for things like that. So normally the only time when injectors normally really fail is either electrically, like the Pinto or something's gone, like the coils and stuff start burning out, or you've somebody's in there messing around with it. Normally it's electrical, pardon me, with the Pintos and stuff, or if you have a direct injection vehicle like a GDI vehicle, and you've had a misfire in that cylinder, and then the fuel charge isn't burning properly, then you can have where the injector's going to get fouled up, and that's only because you've had raw fuel in there, it's built up in heat and everything else, and it's glazed and stuff on there. But now that's not a problem to the injector as much as it's a problem now because it's a cause. It's an effect because of another fault. It's caused now this to happen. So the only time I've really seen injectors fail is it's like if it's got something inside where the Pintos, the needle goes up, opens up, that's failed, or it's got like an electrical short or something in it, and that's failed. That's normally where injectors fail. Unless you're running a really, really, really poor quality fuel that has a lot of and you're not getting like decent fuel from like a petrol station or gas station, or you're running a lot of old fuel and stuff like that, and weird dodgy mixes, then you can have problems with injectors. But then now you're kind of going to the extreme. You're causing your own problems, and that can happen if you're getting really poor quality fuel where it's leaving deposits and it's not the proper cleaners. That's where you're always best to go to a decent, reputable gas station, and not just go trying to find the cheapest gas station, Billy's gas down the road who just buys the cheapest gas you can find from wherever you can find it, and you don't actually know what he's putting in. For all you know, he's putting kerosene in there. You don't know, right? So, but yeah, I would think that it's probably the injector clean that he's talking. You can try that. I worked at, as an apprentice, we did stuff like that. I don't actually think, thinking back now on my experience, I don't think it actually really solved anything, any of the vehicles. I think probably maybe where it solved is the varnish, or maybe we put the stuff in the intake and it maybe cleaned up the valves a bit, but it never really solved anything on them. It was more just an upsell, and maybe a preventative thing a bit, maybe cleans the combustion chamber a bit or something like that, but that's only if you're getting like cheap fuel, like I said. So Scotty's, like I said, from what I've seen, what he shows is data PIDs and stuff there, and it's kind of an customer complaint once again. It's not injectors.
I'm going to take it for a ride and see what it does. Now this is a 4-speed electronically controlled transmission. So we want to make sure that it's shifting correctly into all 4 gears. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going 40 miles an hour and it's going about 1300 RPMs. That's totally normal. It's not getting stuck in any gear. If it stayed in gear too long, it would make it get worse gas mileage, but it's not doing that. Now sometimes if brakes are dragging, you get bad gas mileage. So let's put it in neutral. And as we can see, it's still gliding quite well, even though we're going slightly uphill. So the brakes are definitely not dragging on it.
All right, so it's on his test drive, and as I've seen other mechanics do and stuff like that, and maybe Scotty's as sophisticated as some of the other ones I've watched and I've seen. He's not showing any data PIDs or showing like no camera on there to show the fuel trim. So he could actually say if it's injectors, or even if it's the mass airflow sensor, it'll show up on that. You can usually watch that on the autel that he's got there, but he's not showing that. Listening to it, I've listened a few times very, very closely, and I can't hear, and it's hard to hear over the road noise, and Scotty's very loud talking. I can't hear any misfires. I honestly don't think it's injectors. It's definitely injectors. Injectors would cause a misfire. I've seen this numerous times where injectors are failing, and they're stuck open or stuck closed, or they're not opening or not maintaining the magnetic field long enough, and it will cause, and it can cause a misfire because they're not firing correctly. Or they said they've been fouled up because we've had a misfire down the road, or we ran a report for quality fuel. So I can't hear that. Now his comment about the brakes dragging just by driving along and then just taking your foot off and letting it coast, that can help diagnose a dragging brake. Well, no, I wouldn't say 1, maybe 2 if you had like both rears were kind of stuck on, or both fronts or stuff like that, or unless one was really dragging. If you had the one caliper was like proper seized. I've encountered numerous vehicles, like I said, and in fact I just did one just recently. A fella, and he had brakes that were seized up on it. He had one that was seized up quite well. He never knew. He drove around all over the place, like coast, and like that. Never had an indication. The only indication he had is I happened to be doing. You need brakes soon. When I looked into it, I realized one side was looking all right, and the other side was like it was worn right down. Well, actually, no, he actually came in. I wouldn't say that. He came in because his brakes had gone metal to metal, and he needed new discs and I needed new rotors and pads. And I looked at one side, it was fine. The other side was completely destroyed. It just had gone right down. And when I looked into it, it was the caliper. The caliper has seized right on. I could barely even push it back and cranking on it, and it was seized on. But he wouldn't know, and he didn't even get onto the fact that maybe his fuel mileage was being affected. But the coast test never indicated anything. The customer never got onto it. I had drove it real quick. Actually, I didn't drive it then because the brake was metal to metal on that particular one. So I wasn't. I'm not going to drive a vehicle with the brakes are compromised, like that. But yeah, he never had an indication. I've driven other vehicles, And if you did the coast test and stuff, first one, you just take it out real quick. It never indicated until I put it up on the ramp and visually inspected the brakes and realized, hold on, one side is a lot more worn than the other. Or I used a heat gun, like it's like the guns that, not actually a heat gun. It's it's like the thermometer has the laser shoots out, and you can tell. Or even just do the touch test. Take it out for a drive, go back, touch the wheel, touch the rim, or where the hub is, and feel one side and the other side, and just like touch the back of your hand, because the back of your hand is more sensitive to heat, and touch the backs. And one side feels warmer than the other, that's probably a brake that's dragging. And that's quite a simple test anybody can do, even Mr. Kilmer. But yeah, that's not done. He's done the coast test to go, oh, the brakes are fine. That's not, especially modern vehicles and stuff, and the way it's suspension and steering, everything's set up and everything else. And that's not a reliable test. It can help in more something that's more dragging a lot more, but normally by that time you got customers complaining maybe the vehicle's seems lacking power, or there's a funny smell because the brakes are pretty much lighting on fire, stuff like that. But it's from what he's saying, from a slight fuel economy issue, I would think that a brake could definitely still be dragging, but it's not enough to feel on the coast test. But it's definitely over a whole tank of fuel, MPG is dropping, because it is actually, the vehicle is working a bit harder than it should be. Also, another question would be to look and see what's the customer carrying in the vehicle all the time. Are they towing? Are they doing a lot of towing? And I have seen this. Believe me, I've seen this. Customers come in, oh, my vehicle, since when I first bought it, and now recently my MPG has gone low. And I go, oh, what are you using it for? I've been towing a horse trailer around for the last few months. Yeah, your fuel economy has gotten worse. Unhooked the horse trailer. Yeah, hold on, wait a minute. Now your fuel economy's got a lot better. Holy, yeah. So you do get silly things from customers. So I'm not blaming the customer, but you need to ask questions. A good technician is, you have to kind of be a bit of a detective. You have to ask the proper questions, gather all the evidence, look at the whole thing, look and see what the fault is, and then from there, then make a conclusion and stuff like that. And I've kind of, that's my approach, is I approach stuff like this like a detective. I ask all the questions of the person who's presenting it, anything else, take a phone number in case anything else comes up. Then I gather all the evidence around and look at the whole picture, try to look at everything, look at the usual suspects, work our way through, and gather evidence before coming up with a conclusion. And I never guess this agnostic. So I just look at something and go, oh, it's gonna be this, because where's the proof? Right? It's like, a police officer just can't say, yeah, it was him. I know it's him. How? Where's your proof? Well, I don't have any, but I know it's him. No, it's not the way it works, right? And that's the way how modern diagnostics has to work. Is you have to have proof, tangible proof, and that's the only way to approach it properly. So yeah, his little test there was just coasting real quick uphill. No, it's not a reliable test. And it could still be this one possibility. After checking the tire pressures, that's the first thing I would have done. Check tire pressures, and then gone from there. And then check the brakes. Even a quick visual inspection can say, oh, are these brakes inside and outside? I've seen people check the outside and they go, oh, they're fine. Meanwhile, the insides are nearly metal to metal, and it's because the caliper's stuck a certain way. Usually, if the outsides are worn down, it's the slides are stuck. If it's the insides, then it's the caliper that's stuck, because slides in the calipers can also seize up as well, and that can cause extra drag. So that test there, no, Scotty, for somebody who trumps his own horn about being such an experienced mechanic, that's not a reliable test.
On its thing. Now I did notice that it had one of those K&N oiled filters. You got to clean them and oil them, but if you put too much oil, that oil can get sucked into the mass airflow sensor, which can damage it, make it go bad, give bad data. Something that simple could make it go bad.
I am going to stop right there, just a real quick one. Yes, I will agree with Scotty on that. Those K&N air filters, if they're over oiled, can cause a problem working on the mass airflow sensor, and especially the setup he's got there, where the mass airflow sensor is quite close to the airbox. The oil can sometimes you push through, it can get in the air, you can get the mist, it can get onto the element. I will agree they have been known to cause a problem, especially vehicles with mass airflow sensors. Saying that, I did, at the very beginning, he did pull that up, and I have personal experience with those K&N air filters. That one did not look over oiled. Usually over oiled, you can see there, the gauze inside is actually really, really red. And sometimes you even see it where if you hold it up and hold it for a bit, you can start seeing a little bit on the rubber start kind of coming down and starting to gather and drip. Then they've been over oiled. Normally this means they have to be cleaned out again. They're gonna get the kit, put the cleaner, clean them out again, and re-oil them properly. And that's where you have to kind of have experience or be experienced with them. I've done them before. I've had a vehicle with a mass airflow sensor. I've never ever had a problem ever with my vehicle running K&N air filters like that. But then I also, I'm trained. I do have my training. I do have knowledge, more in-depth knowledge than your regular Joe who goes down to the Napa or whatever, Pet Boys or whatever you want to call it, bumper to bumper, depends where you're from. And buys a K&N air filter. So yeah, or the recharge kit. So yeah, I don't think there's a problem on this vehicle here. Looking at that air oil filter, that did not look over oiled to me from what I seen in the video. So obviously I haven't personally looked at the filter, but it didn't look. I have serious doubts. Also, his data pits didn't support that.
Personally, I'm not a fan of those oiled filters. The paper ones never had any problems. I would stick to that myself. Filters in here and the air goes that way. Sometimes that can contaminate the sensors inside and cause all that problem. I see this quite often on Toyotas with that kind of mileage on it. They still run like a clock and they shift like a dream. The gas mileage goes down. I'm going to find out over time because I told them, get rid of that oiled filter and put in a regular paper filter so you won't get oil and ruin the new mass airflow sensor. He's going to put 2 cans of Chevron Techron in a gas tank and 1 tank of Shell Super Unleaded gas to help clean the system out. Now if it doesn't fix it, it may possibly need new fuel injectors. They will wear out over time and stop spraying a conical shape, then they're inefficient. It's not really going to affect how it drives all that much. To a computer, yeah, that data we saw, you could see those numbers jumbled around, 24, 2499, 2499, 25001. It can affect that, but you're not really gonna feel it because that thing ran perfectly fine. If somebody would have brought me that vehicle and they were gonna buy it, I'd say, well, it's got a lot of miles, but it still runs pretty good. Don't pay too much with that high mileage, but it's still a good running car. It is getting about 50 miles less per tank. Now, that's not all that much when you think about it. It's still a very good, solid car, but these tiny little things can make the gas mileage go off like that.
So on this final note here, just because obviously this is near the end of the video, yeah, what Scotty's saying there, he was told the customer's doing that. Customer, I don't think, hopefully the customer goes and, when he fills up with fuel, he checks his tire pressures, because I think that's going to solve this problem. As for the K&N air filter, yeah, I mean, it's probably not getting a lot of benefit anyways. And they told, you're supposed to get 20 more horsepower from putting this air filter, and no, there's other things, you have to get that. You don't really get that. Sometimes you can feel a little bit of a difference. I've had some vehicles I've put a K&N in, and you could feel a difference. And my fuel economy actually got better. And the engine was actually breathing a little better. It depends on your engine and it depends how it responds. But I've also seen where it's gotten worse, with certain vehicles, or they see you have problems with the mass airflow sensor and stuff like that. Running the super unleaded fuel and stuff like that, if I were Scotty, I wouldn't really. Some vehicles are very sensitive to the octane rating of fuels, and some are designed to run on your regular fuel. If you put in the super unleaded higher octane fuel, it can actually cause running issues. It can cause where you can get detonation, you can get pre-ignition, or it can affect it can affect other things. It also runs hotter, so you can have problems with something. You're burning up your spark plugs. You can have problems with valves. I had a vehicle in which it had to actually run on mid-grade fuel, and if I ran it on regular fuel, then I'd have pre-ignition, and it would have running issues. I'd have a pinging. I had to run at least mid-grade fuel. I had to have I think it was 89 octane or something like that. I couldn't run 86 or I don't look at octane levels very much. And So yeah, I would, if for him, I kind of, from a professional standpoint of view, I would advise on that. If the customer wants to go and do that, it's their vehicle, by all means. But I would say, look, be very careful. You may actually cause more problems than you're going to try to solve running different octane fuels. You can try to throw a fuel system cleaner through it, but like I said, looking at what I've seen from the evidence, I haven't looked at the vehicle myself, but from what I've seen, what Scotty has said and has shown, I honestly don't think it's going to cause a problem, because that is not the issue. The issue is not injectors. In fact, I said I will put money on the issue is not injectors. The injectors are fine. The fuel trim levels look fine. The air fuel mixture sensor was fine. It's, is everything else seen? There's no evidence supporting replacing the injectors. There's nothing, right? Not even if there wasn't even a customer complaint of a lack of power or a lumpy run, idle stuff. Because there's nothing like that. So the injector thing is bull. That's, once again, he's diagnosing. He's doing guess gnostics, and that's what he's done, and that's what he's basing it on. Unfortunately, if this customer's believed him, the customer's going to be wasting his money, and I would put pound a pinch of salt that is probably going to still have the same MPG issues unless he fixes his low tire pressure issues. So that's kind of it. I'm sorry if I've rambled on. Obviously, this video is ended up being a lot longer than anticipated. I've kind of gone on a few rants and stuff here, and a lot of information I've tried to get across. So I really hope that you've made it this far, and that you get on. And if you have anything you want to comment or anything you want to say, I would like to say something. I just realized when I did the storage measure, fuel ratio is 14.7, not 14.1. So if you've made it this far and if you've corrected that in the comments, it's fine. Yeah, sorry, it's just because it's 14.7 to 1, not 14.1 to 1. So my fault. I said I don't always have to adjust them. Vehicles nowadays, the PCM adjusts the air fuel ratio. So but yes, I do know the station metric ratio is. Thank you. But yeah, so I'll maybe continue to the end here, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please hit the like button if you like it. Comment down below, and please subscribe to my channel. I'm going to try to do a few more. I'm going to do a bit more repair stuff coming up here, more repair videos. I just thought I'd do this one here, but I'm just trying to get better. But yeah, thanks for watching again. I know this has been a lot longer video than I anticipated, but I think it's just that there's a lot of information that I need to get across, because Scotty, I think a lot of his stuff is just, it's so vague at the best of times, and that's like if he's actually given any kind of information, and most of the time it's just so out to left field and not even close to being correct, that I really had to kind of set a lot of these records straight. And I do find out with a lot of his videos is that there's just so much misinformation, and so and then if he does do one that's correct, it's so vague that it's just ridiculous. I mean, if he wants to help people, he needs to actually have the correct information and actually give the information. So thanks for watching again. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I said I don't have anything personally against Mr. Kilmer, but I do have something against his misinformation and his misinformation and also his tests, or lack of test methods, but that he tends to just guess anyways and say, yeah, well, it's definitely this, is definitely that, but without giving any kind of evidence, without doing any kind of testing himself, without even mentioning any kind of testing himself. And so all he's doing is he's showing people and saying, yeah, this is how you diagnose this, but it's not, because he hasn't done anything, hasn't done any diagnosis. I I'm just going to throw a few shout outs because if you want to see some proper technicians do some good shout outs, ones I can think of offhand, you got Scanner Danner, check out his videos. There's loads of them. You'll learn so much off the man. He teaches at a college, technical college, as well as he does diagnostics for different shops around his area. There's also a guy, South Main Auto Channel. He's brilliant. He does really good diagnostics, runs his own shop. He's in the New York area. Apparently he's like the go-to guy. Other shops can't figure it, they take it to him. This guy, Diagnose Dan, he's from Denmark, but but his stuff's in English. He's very good at diagnostics, a bit more advanced. So it may be harder for like the layman, but if you're a technician and stuff like that, watch some of his videos. And this guy, Mechanic Mindset, he's quite good. He does more of the stuff with scopes and stuff like that. Even some of the Chris Fix stuff, if you want like just some basic kind of tinkering stuff, I find his videos are better than Scotty's. His stuff is a bit more, I haven't watched a lot, but what I have watched, he actually does do some basic diagnostics, properly prove and proving that there's an issue with something like a power window or stuff like that. And he does, I think, honestly, I would think his does a better job, at least on that point. Some of the stuff he's done, I personally don't agree with. This is method or the way he's done it. I can see why he's done it, and it's his personal preference. So that's why I really haven't done stuff on him, because I can't really see anything. This is more personal preference, and I'm not going to put my personal preference and say, oh, I wouldn't have put that switch here. I wouldn't have done that ground at that point there. Does it work? Yes. Could anybody else do it like that? Yes, you could, and it would work. Would I want to do it like that? No, because I personally didn't like a few of the things he did, like some fog lamps on the vehicle, and I just didn't like a couple of points when he put like the switch. I thought it's going to interfere, it's going to cause problems like that. But like that's his personal opinion. Maybe it worked for him. Also seen him do a window regulator on I think it was his Hummer or something like that, and he did a very good job, and he proved it, and he replaced the part, did it on the cheap. We showed the cheap way of doing it, but he also showed how to properly diagnose it. And they say, yes, they showed why. How do you can you prove that this part failed? And they show it, and then it showed now how you prove and the difference. So yeah, it was a legit video. Sorry, but yeah. Thanks for watching. I know I've rambled on again. I've definitely gone on a bit of a rant here several times, but thanks for watching again, and I hope to see you soon. I said I will be coming with more videos here. I got one that's been in the works for way too long, but life's got in the way. The weather is because I have had to do it outside and stuff like that, but I will be getting on it, and I'll be putting it up soon. All right, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you again.